Now for the next 3 or 4 videos here in a group, I want to talk about something. We're going to go just a little deeper than arrays here. We're going to talk about C++ containers. Now these are some things that you need to be aware of, and you need to go dig a little deeper and play with these things because they can really do some great things to your code. Now, what is a container? Let's answer that question first. Well, a container is an object that we can use to store or organize other objects. Now, where do these things come from? Well, they're part of the C++ Standard Template Library, or STL. Now, understand this is part of the standard, normal, if you will, C++. If you're working in the CLI version or Microsoft's version of C++, you won't have these things exactly the same way necessarily. You'll have different functionalities and maybe some more or less functionalities, but just understand we're talking about standard C++ here. Now there are 6 containers that are defined in the STL, and then there are kind of like sub-containers under those, and I'm not going to go into the sub-containers here. But what I want to do in this group of videos is, first of all, tell you about these 6 containers and just let you know that they're out there. Then I want to take one of them, we'll do a vector, because it's kind of the one that's most commonly used, and show you some of the really cool things you can do with these. Now they really are arrays with a lot more bells and whistles. Alright, so let's talk about the 6 containers that are defined for you in the STL. Now these objects are out there. You can just reference the standard template library and just use these things. Okay, there is the vector, the deck. Now in Tennessee, in the southeastern United States, that looks very much like DQ. Alright, but the actual nerd correct pronunciation of that is deck. The list, the map, and the set, and then finally the bit set. Now I'll talk about each one of these here, and I'll just kind of share with you the basics of these so that you understand why you would use these. Now we'll do that in a separate video, but arrays were cool, and we actually looked at those in a separate section of the course here. And an array is a way to put multiple values out there and associate them with one variable name, and then we just kind of call or manipulate the values by index position. Okay, well, these C++ containers are arrays. They've just been enhanced, if you will, with specific predefined behaviors and properties. The reason being, there are a lot of different instances when we're programming that we need to do specific things with groups of items. Sometimes we just need to stick them into memory and then read them out, top to bottom. Other times we need to put them into memory and then we need to sort them after we get them there. Sometimes we put them in memory and we need to insert something in the middle. And so what each of these containers has done, it's been built specifically to have certain functionalities and to be efficient at those things. So you need to familiarize yourself with these things. Okay, now let's talk about the basic syntax, and I'll use the vector as an example. Now you will see this listed out there just like you see here, the word of the object, vector, and then inside these brackets you'll see a T. Now you may also see a K in there. T means type, and we're talking data type. K means key, and every once in a while we'll put a key in there, and this is for these key paired values or dictionary values, you'll hear them called sometimes. But let's look at this. In this instance, this vector right here means an object of type vector. Think of this just like we did when we built our own classes and used them. This vector is a type that has certain functionalities like a class, and we are going to instantiate an object of a vector that works with whatever data type we tell it. Okay, the T simply tells it what type data type that we're going to put in our vector object. And so a vector with int inside here where the T is tells us that we want to create a vector that's going to store and manage integers, and we're going to call our vector or our instantiation of the vector object days. Alright, and that will create a vector object named days, and it will manage and store our integer values for us. Alright, pretty straightforward. This looks complicated when you see it in examples, or for some reason when you hear nerds talk about this out there in the books or on the videos. I don't know why, it just seems confusing and a bit intimidating, and so I'm going to give you some very simple overviews and then some fairly involved examples. Not involved, but we're going to go over quite a bit with this vector, just to give you an idea of some of the cool things you can do with these things. Okay, so that's kind of the intro into C++ containers. The part about containers in C++ that you really want to understand the most is which container do I want to use. And we're going to talk about that in this video in just the broadest terms, because you need to familiarize yourself with these, and you'll have a favorite that you tend to use, and it's probably going to be the vector. But understand, of the 6 containers in the C++ standard template library, there's a lot of possibilities here for dealing with the data that you normally deal with, because keep in mind, what we're normally writing with programs is really nothing more than memory collection, management, and reporting, right? And so the 6 containers, I've already talked about them in the video entitled C++ containers, but they're the vector, the dec, looks like DQ, list, map, set, and bit set. So let's look at each one of these and talk about generally what they do, and this will help you understand why you need to familiarize yourself with these, play with them, and learn how to use them. Now the vector, which is what we're going to do examples on in some separate videos, is simply an array that will grow in size automatically. Now this is really cool, because the challenge with arrays has always been, okay, how do we resize them? You know, we'd redimension them, we'd do all kind of stuff, and so there's a lot of overhead, a lot of things involved. And so each one of these containers is built and designed with certain characteristics in mind so that they're more efficient at different things. So a vector is going to grow in size automatically. Now new elements are added very efficiently only to the end. Now you can add a new element to the middle, but you involve a fair amount of overhead, and it's not what the vector is really built for. But if you want to throw things into an array really quickly, use a vector. And I'm going to show you some programmatic things that you can do with vector that's really neat and really cool. We'll look at that in a separate video. Now the dec, notice it's dec T. This is very similar to a vector, except with this one you can also add elements to the beginning. Now what we're really getting into here is when we need to manage lists. These could be customer call tickets, this could be all kind of things, but whether we need first in, first out, last in, first out, all those kinds of situations that you get into, it's going to determine, for example, what kind of memory container you would use here. Now let's move on to the list. And this is another popular one. Data can be added or removed from any position in the list. Now the data can also be reorganized. So think sorting. Anytime I'm going to collect a list of things and then sort it in some sort of order, the list container is the one I want to use. Now the map container, notice this is one of the ones that uses K. So this is going to use key values to help, and the data is going to be stored based on that key value. Okay, you know, color equal, name equal, that sort of thing. All right, now the value of each key must be unique. All right, so color equal red, color equal blue, color equal green. Makes sense? 2 color equal red is going to cause a problem here. All right, but with a map, that's what we can keep up with. Now a set, notice set T, this is a map in which each object is its own key. Now each object in this one has to be unique. Now this is more or less a vector, but everything has to be unique. In a vector, I can have 10 elements and 4 of them can be identical. Okay, so I can have 4 identical numbers in there. In a set, can't do that. Each individual object must be unique, and objects can't be changed here. Okay, in a vector, I can set, you know, element number 3, if it's equal to 10, I can just set it equal to 12 and it'll make the change. In a set, I can't do that, and I have to delete that particular object and then go back and insert a new one. All right, and then bit set, this one's very efficient for all kinds of things, but with this stores a fixed number of bits in the container, in the bit set container, and of course each element only has 2 possible values, a 0 or a 1. Okay, now as you can see in this short video, these containers, 6 with some sub-containers under these. Okay, for map, you can do a multi-map. There's all kind of little things. I won't go into that now, but there's a lot of functionality here that you will need from time to time. And since you're writing in C++, you've chosen the language. One of the reasons is because you can manage the memory completely. You can really wring performance out of a C++ program, make it run really fast, very efficiently, and knowing these containers and knowing which one to choose can really help in that department. Okay, so now let's in some separate videos go take a look at using, for example, the vector container.